Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Schaefer. I'm the Associate Director for Graduate Student Success and Professional Development with the Graduate School at the University of Texas at San Antonio. And this is our final Career Pathways guest speaker session for fall 2023, focused on our College of Sciences. And this session is our national perspectives. And I am thrilled to have with us Dr. Michelle Jones-London with NIH. Dr. Michelle Jones-London is a neuroscientist, serves as Chief of the Office of Programs to Enhance Neuroscience Workforce Diversity at the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke at NIH. She was also the co-chair for both the NIH Blueprint, which was a collaborative effort of 14 NIH institutes and centers that support research on nervous systems, and NIH Brain Initiative training, inclusion, and equity efforts. Dr. Jones-London plays a critical leadership role in guiding and developing strategies, funding opportunities, and inclusive excellence activities across the neuroscience research community. She joined NINDS as a program coordinator in July 2006. Dr. Jones-London earned her Ph.D. in neuroscience from the Department of Neuroscience and Anatomy at Pennsylvania State University College of Medicine. She then received postdoctoral training as a research fellow at University of Pennsylvania in the Department of Psychiatry. Dr. Jones-London came to the NIH in July 2004 as an Emerging Leader Fellow. She performed duties across the Department of Health and Human Services, including the Center for Scientific Review, FDA Office of Women's Health Science Program, and the immediate office of the Secretary, Intergovernmental Tribal Affairs Office. Dr. Jones-London directs the Diversity Training and Workforce Development Programs at NINDS, which include diversity and reentry supplements, postdoc predoctoral fellowships to promote diversity and health-related research, career development awards to promote diversity, and diversity research education grants, including the Neuroscience Scholars Program with SFN. She also provides oversight of the Institute's diversity outreach initiatives at several other national scientific conferences. Her trans NIH efforts include oversight of the NIH Blueprint Endure and DSPAN programs, the BRAIN, BRAIN Initiative Diversity, K99 and R00, former project scientist for the NIH National Research Mentoring Network, and part of the leadership team for NIH faculty institutional recruitment for sustainable transformation. Her research interests have focused on understanding monominergic neurotransmitter regulation and mechanisms of behavioral psychopharmacology in animal models of disorders such as ADHD, Tourette syndrome, and depression. I am happy to turn our presentation over to Dr. Michelle Jones-London with NIH.
Thank you so much for that. You've kind of given a Cliff Notes version of my talk, which is nice, but I'll delve into more. Let me start sharing my slides. And all right, so you should be able to see it right in the right presentation form. So really delighted to be invited here today. And I'm going to give a talk that's probably not my usual talk because I've been clearly instructed not to just go over my mechanisms. And as a person who loves their job and loves talking about the programs that I have, this was a hard ask. But today I'll tell you a little bit about my sort of journey to the NIH, more specifically, my journey to NINDS. And then I'll focus on what it means to have a career pathway outside of academia, which was the charge that I was given. So let's start at the beginning. And you've already heard this in terms of my education. I'm trained as a neuroscientist, received my PhD at Penn State University College of Medicine, then went on to do my postdoc at Penn in Philadelphia. In terms of my research work, it really was focused on both molecular and behavioral understanding of models of depression or other neuropsychiatric disorders. During that time, I was funded through a lot of NIH programs, so really could appreciate some of the mechanisms that I now oversee. I was funded by an NIMH diversity supplement, which is a supplement that is given to a research grant to bring someone in and train them, and also see or receive fellowships during my time. Also had experience being a T32 trainee. So that's an institutional grant that NIH gives. And then it had some teaching experience throughout sort of my career. So with all that experience and some success in research and realizing that even though I had a skill set and enjoyed research, in my heart, I always knew that maybe like many of you, that I didn't think the bench was my calling. And where I really wanted to go was more towards the administrative side of science. What I'd been told was that that was really hard to do just right out of your PhD, that they were looking for people that were coming from faculty careers. And even though I had even experience as a postdoc, that it would be a little bit difficult to get my foot in the door. And so, while I'm doing my postdoc, I kind of thought maybe I'll go the industry route. There, it seemed as though I would still get more research experience, and then maybe I can pursue sort of what I always wanted to do, was really focus on workforce diversity and more outreach and helping people to succeed in this training and funding space that looked like me, where I had really experienced most times being an N of one. So during that process and during my postdoc, one of the worst things and probably best things happened to me. I broke my leg, totally shattered my entire leg, and I had to be out of the lab for a little bit. And while I was on the couch, this opportunity for the Emerging Leaders program came up. And this was a program that was really established by the Health and Human Services after realizing that a large proportion of people that were currently in the federal workforce were set to retire. And they sort of call that the graying of the administration. And they needed some way to really fast track people into a scientific administrative career at the NIH, the CDC, FDA. So they created this Emerging Leaders program, which was really 2 years of leadership training, exposure across HHS, and then a promise of a position. So I saw this, it had the word fellowship in it. I had already spent 5 years getting my PhD, 3 years with the postdoc, and I thought, oh my God, how do I explain to my family that I am not going to have a job, that I'm going to do a fellowship? And what it turned out, when I thought about it, was if this gets my foot in the door and this gets me to what I really want to do with my career, I need to put aside this feeling of instant gratification and pursue it. And that was probably one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life, because it really did give me an opportunity to get into the federal government, see a bird's eye view of the jobs that are there, and have an experience. So I was able to work at CSR, FDA, the immediate office of the secretary, where I worked with a tribal affairs office, really understanding that relationship of tribes to the federal programs, which is more of a government to government relationship. And also was able to work in our communications office, and then finally landing a position in the Office of Minority Health and Research. And so I tell you all this not so that you can hear just my life story, but to really think about, if you are interested in pursuing a career outside of academia and you're thinking about the federal government, This particular fellowship program no longer exists, but there are other fellowship programs like it. For example, the AAAS fellowship. Many of the people that I've hired in my office have come from that fellowship program. There is also the Presidential Management Fellowship Program, which gives you a similar experience of, spending time as a fellow and then having the ability to secure what we call a full-time or FT position, which within the federal government. So after that experience of the fellowship and coming to the NIH, I worked as a program director. That's probably something you've heard of. This is a program director or a program officer. And then in 2017, I was able to actually establish my own office. And that's where I am now, the Office of Programs to Enhance Neuroscience Workforce Diversity, or what we call OPEN. And there, the strategy really is to do exactly what I said I would want it to do in terms of identifying students along the training pathway, to recruit and prepare them, developing meaningful mentorship relationships, providing resources for others, webinars, outreach, conferences, and then evaluation, always taking a data-driven approach in everything we do in the office. And in the corner, you just see my wonderful, very diverse team who helps me to accomplish these goals of the office. Here, I'm often asked, what is a typical day like for somebody who works in the federal government, who's overseeing these types of programs? And this really gives you the breadth of things that we focus on. It's not just, helping with grant administration or helping with funding opportunities, but all of these different buckets that are inclusive. This is for my office, but I would say for many of the programs that are run throughout NIH, you're going to see something similar in terms of, for us, the programs are about career preparation or career advancement. For others, it may have a very specific scientific focus. There's also a lot of collaboration, so other NIH, trans NIH programs. In terms of reporting, that is a big part of everything we do as the federal government. You're reporting to the White House. You're also reporting to other sort of stakeholders that are involved, evaluation, which I had already mentioned, and then just the day-to-day administration and operations, and then communication outreach. Because you can develop a lot of programs, but if people don't know about them, then really what is the point? The other thing that I want to just put before you, as I said, I'm not going to really talk about the mechanisms, but this gives you a sense of how, when you're doing this type of work, you have to look across the pathway. It really isn't just focused on one program or one, as a scientist, it's one project. We're really looking across to really take a systems approach to the work that we do, and especially in the training and the career development space. It really is all along the pathway that you have to think about strategies. And, if we're helping, graduate students to get into the system, but then people are falling off at the postdoc and the new faculty, are we really growing the workforce? And so in purple really gives you the sense of all along the pathway, my office is thinking about and developing programs to help these various career stages. And then as an institute, we're thinking about not only the diversity programs, but also general programs, clinician scientist focused programs, and then institutional programs. So for you, what does this mean, and how should you think about these things as you're navigating your career? And often people will say to me, well, how do I show that I have the skills for this type of administrative job? I've only been a researcher, or I've only been at the bench. And what I say is to just remove the word only. As you're training as a scientist, you really are learning a set of competencies and critical skills that are transferable to any job out there. You know, you're exhibiting creativity in terms of your project, you're thinking about critical thinking, you're exhibiting collaboration probably across your research project, and obviously you're communicating. As scientists, we're going to conferences, presenting posters, we're doing data blitzes. There's all of these transferable skills that often it's just about how you present it on your CV or your application if you're thinking about careers outside of the bench. And so there are some things that you should think about as you try to navigate your career path. Focus on your exploration, and instead of what do I want to do with my life, really think about what do I enjoy doing. And I think that's something that really served me well in thinking about some of my experiences during graduate and postdoc. I loved working with the upward bound students. I loved creating community activities to teach and partner with K through 12. And so all of those things kind of rolled up into where I thought I could use my strengths. And in terms of seeking out resources and opportunities, there's so many ways to gather that information now. Even at a lot of the conferences, there are a lot of opportunities to interact with people that are perhaps doing the jobs that you think you want to do. So developing your network is really important. And I know not everybody is a social butterfly, and there are many different types of people in terms of being more introverted versus extroverted. But in terms of really narrowing down opportunities and figuring out what you want to do, I would say to definitely move beyond theoretical to really talking to people, and even doing sort of these coffee chats or interviews, especially with people being so well versed in Zoom now. It's not too much to reach out to someone and just ask for 15 minutes to learn about their job without the pressure of even having a job advertised, but really just asking questions about the position itself. In terms of, other things that I think about when I think about the work that I do, especially in the federal environment, I always say, as public servants, it really is our job to do or do not. There really is no trying. We have to make sure that we're using the investments that we have in a responsible and careful way. So, especially within the DEIA or the diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility space, it really is important that we follow up on action rather than just simply attempting to do something with a half-hearted effort. And so the way that I think about the work that I do and the things that I manage, I talk about sort of the Yoda philosophy and then the four C's in terms of thinking about creativity, community, collaboration, and caring. And so for the creativity, it really is not letting some of these pitfalls in terms of thinking about the wrong problem, judging ideas too quickly, stopping with the first good idea, or failure to build coalition, and then also obeying non-existent rules. Sometimes we put up barriers that are not even there. And a lot of these sort of uh, instructions or sort of ways of thinking about creativity and innovation. As scientists, you're probably doing this already in your current jobs or your current work. And so transitioning that to outside of the bench, once again, into the federal sector is something that will serve you well. With regards to collaboration, as I mentioned, a lot of what we do, especially for me, where I sit in the neuroscience space, it's not just this one institute. You're working with other institutes to carry out the scientific mission or the scientific goals. Just for example, think of something like Alzheimer's disease. There's a footprint for NIH, my institute in that space, but there's also the National Institute of Aging and others. So learning how to collaborate, working together, having that skill set of being able to work in teams is really valuable. And it's important in terms of the scientific space because a lot of these questions and issues go across all different institutes. And the slide that I'm putting up for you now is just an example of one of those collaborative spaces. And it's the NIH blueprint, which includes 14 um, other neuroscience institutes. And we have one of the hallmark programs within the blueprint is our Endure, where we fund undergraduates to then partner with T32s. And then the goal here is to really make sure that they get into competitive PhD programs. Another program that we have in this collaborative effort with the NIH Blueprint, but also the BRAIN Initiative now, is the DSPAN or the F99K00, which is a transitional award that funds someone in their first to 2 years of their graduate school training. And then if they're successful, they get the 4 years of funding to go along with that F99 to then look for competitive postdoc programs. So these are examples of how in the work that I do, we work across institutes. In terms of the work, there also is a lot of interaction with an external communities, so community building. And the way that we do that is working with PIs in the extramural community to put in R25 programs. And we have several examples of really successful ones that don't only focus on the mentorship and the professional development for people to go into academia, but they also really, I think Brains especially does a good job of this in terms of working with people to find their passion and their skill sets and other careers as well. So these are activities that build community and really have mentoring hubs. So the Neuroscience Scholars Program that we have at Society for Neuroscience, I mentioned Brains, but we also have Diversifying the Community of Neuroscience, or Diversifying CNS, Minds, Transcends, which is focused on neurologists, and a program at UAB, which is the Roadmap Scholars Program. So if you are a pre-doc or postdoc or junior faculty who is looking for that type of community and sort of people to help with the career development and thinking about next steps, these are programs that you actually should really Google and think about applying to join them. The other way that we really focus on external community and the community building, and is a big part of what is the program side of if you work at the NIH, is always kind of sort of seeding think tanks and bringing people in to discuss the programs. The job is very interactive, not only internally, I talked about trans NIH, so people within NIH talking to each other, but also making sure we bring groups together. So this is just an example of one of the activities that we have in the blueprint where we bring all of the programs that we fund within our diversity programs together and host a workshop and really focus on leadership and building connections between our grantees, but also making sure that program staff are interacting as well. The other thing that we do in terms of sharing with the external community is developing, for my office, biannual workshops where we bring together all of our institutional programs. And there, the thought is that in this space where you're working and you're developing programs, it can be important. We think we're very informed, but the reality is that we're not the boots on the ground. And so it's very important to go out there to the community, to engage, to develop workshops where not only we can learn what are sort of the pain points, but they can learn from each other. And so we've had these workshops for a number of years now where, first we started with forming a neural network, then we activated the neural network. Now we're strengthening the neural network. And the last one was maintaining a neural network. So we'll see how long we can go with these very cute names, but it really is creating a sustainable community where we're constantly in this feedback loop, which helps us to better develop and know how people want to be supported out there in the research community. Another piece of the work that I do is developing internal community. So thinking about and making sure that we're educating people that are making the decisions internal, when it comes to funding, when it comes to selecting people for workshops or conferences. We want to make sure that there's a diversity and equity lens, not only for people on the outside in the grants that we fund, but people on the inside who are making the funding decisions. And so about 9 years ago, I started an NINDS diversity work group. And this work group includes the Institute director, other program directors, our program officials, program analysts, and really is a community where we have a lot of conversations about workforce diversity, best practices, data. We talk about the hidden curriculum, and help to design some of the topics for our podcasts that we have. But we also bring in people to do sort of these lunch and learns where we talk about microaggression discussions. So a really activated community where we can all make sure that we're checking our bias when it comes to decisions that we're making as federal funders. The other thing that we do in terms of creating these connections internally and then with the community is that, our offices are in Bethesda, Maryland, and we're very close to DC and other areas where there are large populations of underrepresented groups. And so as the NIH, how can we give back and really create these partnerships and do the work that we can do in terms of increasing the workforce diversity as well. And one of the things that we do is this group called Broadening Research Awareness in Neuroscience Skills and Readiness for Underrepresented Students. And it's an acronym for Brains Are Us, meaning that we go out into the community, we partner with libraries, which is a great resource. A lot of libraries have after-school programs, and they also have free lunch programs during the summer. So the students and the are there. And a lot of times the library is very eager to get content. So this gives us as program administrators opportunities to kind of dust off our scientist hats and go into the community and perform hands-on research experiments. The other thing that we've done with the Prince George's County Public Schools is a series called Light Camera Action Potential. And there we go through neuroscience concepts in a fun way, talking about, for example, when it comes to Marvel heroes, what are things that are true in terms of where we're at, in terms of advancements, and some of the things that are very far-fetched. And it's once again, an active way to work with the community, make the science more real, let them see people that perhaps don't fit the stereotypical model of what they think a neuroscientist could look like, and really go out there in the community, do these skills, and then we invite them back to the NIH. And the pictures are at the bottom is showing the visit at the NIH itself. And as I'm closing, I'll talk about this one in terms of the, how I look at the work that I do. I would say caring, as in the federal government, being in the public sector, being a public servant, you really do have a sense of passion in terms of doing this work, right? Because any of us could go into the private sector or industry and probably make a little bit more money. But to me, the work that we do is so gratifying and fulfilling. And caring to me really means about caring about the people, the work, and the relationships. Being intentional. We have the creativity and the freedom to experiment. And sometimes it takes the hard road, right? we're not a for-profit organization, and so it is easier sometimes to take the harder road in terms of solving the problem without having the pressure of members who are looking for a profit. It really is also about customer service, as we always say. We work for you, taxpayers pay us, so it is our job to serve. And sometimes it is the tension, I will say, in the federal government of sometimes managing policy and common sense. There is a little bit of red tape when it comes to the federal government. But we always keep in mind that the ultimate outcome is not grants. It really is the people, is how we measure, at least in my office, the success in terms of the work that we do. And then we try to incorporate the platinum rule, which many of us know the golden rule: treat others as you would like to be treated, but really it is treating others the way they want to be treated. And I'm getting a little low on time, so maybe I'll skip to this part where I really want to give you a sense of, I've spoken today a lot about NINDS, which is one institute, and often in the community, people talk about NIH, but it really is difficult to talk about NIH, the agency as a whole, because there's 27 institutes and centers, and each really has its own personality, priorities, structure, and budget. And so if you're looking for a job at the NIH, making sure that you do your homework and investigation at that particular institute, going to their web pages, sort of trying to get a sense of the own culture within an IC. And then the slide is also telling you about, like I said before, several cross-cutting NIH initiatives that if you're involved in these initiatives, you probably will be involved in several ICs. With regards to career opportunities at the NINDS, we're always looking for people in terms of career opportunities. The two categories that you'll mostly see for people right out of their PhD or maybe postdoc is what we call a health scientist administrator. And those categories could be a program director, that's someone who's holding a portfolio of grants, but also scientific review officers. So many of you know about the Center for Scientific Review, or CSR, but each IC also has a group that reviews grants. And then we also have scientific project managers. And those tend to be people that manage a specific project, unlike the program directors who manage a broader scope. But then we also have health program specialists. This is usually the scientific entry point. We also call them program analysts. These are people that work with the program director to really do analysis, but also help in co-management of the portfolio. Here, a PhD or postdoc is not required, but usually strongly preferred. And then I want to talk a little bit about what makes a federal resume. What you'll hear from people is to apply to usajobs.gov. That's where all the, especially the NIH positions, other federal positions will be posted. But it's really, really important that when you're thinking about putting in a resume, that you really adhere to what is required for a federal resume. And so here, federal resumes, like any other resume, is easy to understand. You have to have a lot of detail, consistency, making sure you have the order, and that you really update it with your current date. So we place a lot of importance on the resume. The differences between the types of resumes versus a federal versus a private sector, the length, often you hear people don't make your resume more than 2 pages. No, the federal resume, it is fine to include everything that you need to include in there. And the length, usually we see 3 to 5 pages or more. You really want to talk about what qualifies you for the position that you're applying to, and know that your work dates will be verified during your background check. And your experience must be tied to a specific job for the qualification. And all of this information, even if you send your resume to someone that perhaps you know inside of NIH and you're looking for a position, the only way that it can go through the official process is if it's submitted electronically. The other thing, the differences between this and perhaps maybe an academic CV is that once again, the experience must be tied to a specific job and time period. You can list things such as veteran's preference, citizenship, former supervisor name, and you want to really include detailed duties because they are using this to qualify you for the job, right? And if you can't make it past the qualification part, even if someone knows you, has met you, and said, oh, you would be perfect for the job, there's nothing they can do to hire you if you don't make it through that qualification part. In terms of resources, wanted to just share a few of these resources with the links here, and also to tell you about our podcast, which is geared towards people that are applying to our funding mechanisms. But actually, the season 1 and season 2 always also gives you a sense of the jobs that we do internally at NINDS. So we always recommend that to actually our new hires that we hire in to the NINDS, but wouldn't be a bad thing to listen to if you're now thinking about a career on this side of the world. So I'll end there so I can have time for questions, but really end with what we always say in terms of the work that we do. Diversity is not a problem, it's the solution. There's my contact information, and then here are some resources in case you want to connect later. So I'll stop sharing.